Hello and welcome to the We Don't Have Time Davos Hub. We're here in front of Arctic Basecamp, and this is a fantastic place. We're surrounded by the Alps here in Davos, and we're at the Berg Hotel Schatzalm in Davos during the World Economic Forum. And we're here to talk about something very serious. To do this, we have a wonderful panel with distinguished guests, and wonderful to see all of you here. I'll be introducing you shortly. We start this broadcast. It's hosted by We Don't Have Time in collaboration with Hitachi Energy. And we're going to talk about 1.5 degree. Is it a broken promise or does it call for a renewed call for action? This is the topic of this panel. The Paris Agreement commits us to stay well below 2 degrees compared to the pre-industrial levels. And it all sets a preferred limit of 1.5, and we all know this, of course. And we all know that even if it's 10 years since the Paris Agreement, not enough has happened. And during 2024, we actually went past 1.5 degree target. So, is this a broken promise for climate action? And how should leaders think across measures for sustainability to handle this topic? Well, it's time to talk about this, and with me I'm going to start introducing Gail Whiteman, you founder here of Arctic Basecamp. Terrific to have you. And also next to you have Andreas Schierenbeck, CEO of Hitachi Energy. Terrific. And Sandrine Dixson-Declève, you are head of Rome, and also you are executive chair of Earth for All. Terrific to have you. Next is Andreas Prag, CEO and founder, managing director of Women Business Coalition. Terrific to have with us, Andreas Prag. And to Andrew, we have Mayumi Sato. You are a Gates Cambridge scholar and founder of Sustain. Wonderful to have you join this panel. And next is Ingmar Rentzhog, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. So let's start with you, Gail. Tell us, you're a professor of sustainability. What does the public need to know about the temperature, the 1.5 question?
Well, thanks, Katarina, and it's great to have you here at Arctic Basecamp. Arctic Basecamp is science communication, not-for-profit, and it's our 9th year at Davos. And we come because we try to speak science to power, and Davos, of course, where the power brokers come everywhere. So I'm a social scientist, and what my sweet spot is to try to take the natural science data and to make it understandable to people at Davos, to businesses, the boardroom, and also, of course, to the public. So the first part of the answer to your question is that the 1.5C, it's not a promise or a target, actually a physical limit. And I think what we're talking about here, it's a physical reality. It is about the way the Earth system works. Science knows, and natural science I'm talking about here, knows that the climate system is complicated, has a number of really important tipping elements, which particularly in the polar regions will be starting triggered from the 1.5 physical limit. Now, just because 1 year we hit 1.5 does not mean over a 10-year average we will be at 1.5. But what it should be is that this physical, real warning cry that we are very close to be outside the safe zone of humanity. And I think that's the real thing. That means for people, the way we live our lives, the things we love, and it also means for companies and governments, the global economy, what keeps the world as we know going in a relatively non-turbulent way. Turbulence exists, but I tell you, we're walking into a very non-safe zone.
And we noticed it already in the Alps. We've been seeing it for years. Thank you for doing this fantastic work. And now to Andreas Schierenbeck. In terms, from your perspective here, what the significance of the 1.5 temperature rise?
Well, a scientist, I'm an engineer, and I'm glad to be here. And we all see the impact of, what it is doing. From my perspective, reaching the limit, what we have said, I think you said it very, it's one point in time. I think the worst thing would be to give up, As our first marathon, I was training hard, I was setting a goal time, and doing that, I found out ever reaching. So what do you do? You're giving up, stop the race, or you finish the race and start with new effort to continue. And actually, that is where we are proud as Hitachi, that we continue with innovations, delivering more and developing better solutions solutions for sustainability to recover, giving up, making an effort and try again every harder and harder because, sorry, it's still reachable. You said very well, you have to manage it over a period of time. Reaching a breach once should be a warning for us, but it should be the signal to giving up and say, look, anyway, what we are doing, it doesn't matter anymore. Forget about that. Now, actually, we should enforce our efforts and do more of it.
Thank you very much indeed, Andreas Schierenbeck from Hitachi Energy. And Sandrine Dixson-Declève, your perspective, you're president of Club of Rome, prestigious gathering of leaders, and also executive chair of Earth for All. What are your thoughts? The breaching of the 1.5 is goal out of reach from perspective?
Absolutely not. The goal is out of reach, as we just all three indicated. It's becoming now a reality that we must keep ourselves to 1.5 and ensure that we don't go too much further. I think what's important is come from an institution that already rang the warning bell in 1972 with its growth and predicted actually that in the 2020s we would see the environmental and social tipping points, including 450 parts, which is getting up to CO2, which is very close to the 1.5 degrees. So we had the warning bells. We don't have another 50 years to heed this call. We also need to recognize that as we're in the midst of social and environmental tipping points, and we're starting to see pushback to climate science, the increase in climate denialism, that we have to rethink both the narrative, but also specify the cost of inaction. The new science and data demonstrates that at 1.5, so this year, we know that globally we will lose 3% of GDP. Moving toward 3 degrees, we lose upward of potentially 12% of GDP. So I'm saying to governments, not only in my former role as Club of Rome president, if I step down, but in our discussions, this is the moment to ensure that we shift our economies. We actually can be in that safe operating mode. And this opens up all kinds of innovation,
Indeed,
of wonderful new ways to bring people at the center. Because as Gail so rightly said, this is not some kind of off-the-cuff statement around nature is going to start its demise and overshoot is only about polar bears. This is about human existence, greatest existential threat to humanity.
Thank you very much. Andrew Prag, the Managing Director of Policy at the Mean Business Coalition. What does this mean for businesses stepping in its territory of having surpassed the 1.5 last year?
Thank you, and thank you very much, Jason. Businesses react to the economics and physical realities that they're evolving around them. So we see businesses here in Davos stepping up for climate action still and seeing that the economic case for their transition is becoming stronger than more and more compelling, and they see all the physical impacts of climate change building up in their supply chains and becoming an ever-present business risk. So they are continuing to step up. In terms of the recognition of the 1.5, I think Gail said it is a physical limit, but it was also a statement hence by the international community when it was first brought into the Paris Agreement. Unexpectedly, last minute, the international community recognized those small island states, their cry for survival, that this should be the ultimate target of the agreement. And it retains that emblematic statement that the world needs to down, and that becomes even stronger now as we're bumped against those limits, as Gail said at the start of this conversation.
Mm. And what does it mean if we acknowledge that it is out of reach? How would that impact the business coalition?
It's not a question, as I said, of being out of reach yet. It's.
But if we would say that,
right, it would still be
we're not saying that. So I know you're pushing,
and
I like that. But as a scientist, I'm going to come in. It's not out of reach, and I think the whole point is to resist that narrative.
Terrific. I just needed to push that question a bit because people are saying this. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew. We're turning now to Mayumi Sato. You're H. Cambridge scholar and also founder of Sustain Ed. It's wonderful to have you with us here in this panel. And your work is focused on the intersection of climate and justice. And as a member of your generation, you will be inheriting this warmer world. So what are your thoughts about the issue?
Thank you so much. I was told yesterday I was speaking too quietly, so I'll try to speak a lot louder
good.
this time.
You're good.
And I'm not experienced as everyone, so I have a notebook. Just apologies in advance. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Of course, I don't think any people see this as a favorable future outcome, but it is movable, and there are spaces for intervention. Of course, the warming world isn't just about, increasing drought or floods, or flooding. It's also us young people. It's really about the possibility of losing our culture and knowledge systems, especially indigenous. Entire islands are at risk, and a lot of it is about justice-oriented. I guess the idea of us wanting to preserve our Earth is rooted in a issue of justice, and I think that's very much a Yugist mindset. I also want to say that this is profoundly impactful for women in particular. There is a gendered consequence to this. For instance, women are at greater risk during heat waves. They are more likely to suffer from food insecurity. They have a higher burden of care and responsibility in the domestic household unit. And they also experience higher rates of gender-based violence. And so I think that these gendered consequences, social consequences, are also critical. And as a young person, I just want to, yes, of course it affects our generation. But me being Japanese and coming from a very aging country, I saw how it affects my grandparents. And I think it's not just about young people. I think as young people, we really want to focus on all marginalized communities, and that's something that I take very personally, and necessary to be concerned about that because it affects people other than just youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Turning now to Ingmar Rentzhog, We Don't Have Time, and all the CEO. What is your take? I mean, you work with communications and we reach millions of people. So what is your take on number 1.5?
I'm glad that the scientists are optimist ones. It
Isn't it
used to be
wonderful?
the other way around. I will actually, maybe I'm going to be crashing the party a little bit, but just a little bit. I was on a dinner here last night. Sandrine was also part of it in Chatsal. There's a lot of hunt of CSO, Chief Sustainability Officers, and I asked them a question. If they believe that we'll be able to halve emission before the year 2030. That is what we must do according to science in order to stay below 1.5 degrees. And in the room full of hundreds of people, 2 people raised their hand. That's a problem. And I don't think everyone in the room, very depressed and didn't see the reality, quite opposite. I mean, of course we can stay below 1.5 degrees, but with the current political system, I don't think so. If we change tactics. And what we have been rallying on since COP29 at We Don't Have Time is that there is a solution there that will give us more time will actually increase the chances to stay below 1.5. And that is if we prioritize cutting short-lived gases like methane, we can actually start cooling the planet. Because big difference, if we stop emitting carbon dioxide, we will just stop more. Temperature will not go down for hundreds of years. But if we stop emitting methane gases, that is the second common climate gas,
And that can
we can actually lower the temperature. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't do stopping the carbon dioxide. This is something we will pay a lot more focus on. And I believe we had a panel here just before working with enemy. I think we can work even with the fossil fuel industry here because why should they like methane? It's not the main product.
And the lots of leaks from their production with methane can be tracked. Gail wanted to add to this.
So 2 things. And I think the whole point here is that we cannot give up on physical limits. And I think that is not the same as saying, I think the business community is in the right direction. It's very clear clear the business community is not, but for a variety of different reasons. And I think given the current political situation, it is definitely easier to pull back or not be as forward externally on climate and renewable energy. Why? Because it fits existing business models. We know that. So I think the idea that just because a room full of CSO, Chief Sustainability Officers, have courage and don't have faith and don't have commitment doesn't mean that the rest of us are giving up. I think that's a really clear message that I want to send out both for the youth in the audience and for the civil society and for the scientific community, how we're representing, I think, of humanity by saying we have to keep doing this. But just because 1 year it's at plus 1.5, I mean, all right, well then it's okay, we'll go for you. No, it does. It means we keep hitting as hard as possible, even harder. It's a wake-up call. It doesn't mean we're going to stay at 1.49. Maybe we get to 1.6 or 1.7 or we slow that trajectory. But without question, even if we stopped all emissions today or yesterday, there is so much CO2 already in the atmosphere that 27 centimeters of Greenland will melt and rise sea level globally this century. Those kinds of adaptation plans around the world, coastal around the world, are absolutely not on the table yet. So adaptive capacity is what we do, regardless of whether at 1.9, 1.5, 1.53, 1.6 next year. It really is about trying to get as close to 1.5 as possible and about adapt to the stuff that is baked in the system right now. And then the second on methane, I think, oh yes, we do definitely need to stop the leak happening around the world. We need to look at the food system as well. But let's not kid ourselves. Permafrost in the Arctic is thawing, and so much methane there that if that goes off, that is a carb time bomb. And then we're in a whole other situation.
That's a scary scenario.
Maybe I think it would be too easy if you just blame the political systems for not doing things or change. Let you give me two examples. I see they are probably proving my point. If you look at China, the number of electric cars and base is staggering high. The air quality has improved in Shanghai and Beijing dramatically. Probably China has a peak oil this year for imports. So India is the same. They are investing billions and putting renewables out to reducing imports of oil and gas. So it has an impact on that. And the political system should not be used as an excuse not to do change, from my point of view. I think you change all over the world and all kinds of systems, because there is a benefit for that, for the environment, for economic reasons, for a lot of difference. So I think to use it as an excuse and say, yeah, the political environment changed and maybe it's as favorable as before, would be probably too easy. And I'm very careful not to use it in that direction.
Thank you, Andreas. Sandrine.
I wanted to build on that, and I also wanted to build the very important point around islands. I mean, we have to remember that there's a part of the world that's already suffering deeply, apart from climate impacts that we've seen be in LA, which is starting to wake up call for some LA residents. Others are clearly going back into denialism. But I think what's really important is this is extreme for already a very large part of populations. And to the point around how then do hold the right people accountable, I think this is key. And what does it look like? Because right now, we're also all getting caught up in the fear-mongering and these short-term kind of knee-jerk reactions. Our oil and gas companies have pulled out of net zero. Several other companies, banks are doing the same. Some companies have pulled out of the science targets. And yet seeing more companies ever seen before actually commit continuing to do the same thing. So let's not enable that discourse to stop us from acting. But that means we also need to continue, exactly as Gail is saying, holding the right people accountable and holding them to the fire. And that means making sure that governments continue to go in the right direction. Right now, we're going to have to see what happens in the US. I agree that we focus on India, China, Brazil that's actually showing a great deal of leadership, and Lula actually looking at the economics of climate change and the G20 and linking that also to the next COP. But most importantly, let's not forget Europe. Right now is a telling moment where we all have to continue to hold Europe accountable for its net zero plus, its 2050 and 2040 commitments, and its Green Deal.
Thank you, Sandrine. Andre? Sorry, that came out wrong and terribly, Sandrine.
I live in France, used to being called up. Just pick up firstly on the thing. Yes, absolutely, we need to target that, and what that means really is the oil and gas sector and agriculture. And in oil and gas, it's been shown by the IEA that a substantial proportion of those emissions cannot be abated at negative cost if you look at the life cycle. So they're really holding them accountable as to why they're not doing that, and stepping that up is something we need to do urgently. On the political system, of course, politics and policies matter a lot. What we are calling on businesses to step up and advocate positively to show government that they want to see the policy shifts, that they see that as their economic future, their source of future competitiveness, and that the energy transition case is really there economically. And that happens, you start to see the positive tipping points, like the fact that when technology hits a certain level, it really exists, and history has shown that time and again, that change happens slowly and then much than people think. So we need to keep this strong narrative that the visionary businesses, they see what travel, they're calling on governments to support that. And when that happens, we will see these accelerating positive tipping points. There's not to say that the situation isn't very serious, and it is, but there is that history showing that change can happen fast, we think.
Thank you. And let's talk a little bit about how we can invigorate, based on the number that we're talking about, the 1.5 here, how do we invigorate the leaders here? And Mayumi, turning to you here, I know you've been using the legal path to push. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the path that you took in terms of using the law to push for traction here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a social scientist.
I know that, yeah.
And a PhD student. Yeah, I would say I've worked several years in Asia around issues of deforestation and looking at the social and gendered consequences of deforestation and timber supply chains and who that actually impacts. Some of the countries that we worked in are very politically sensitive environment. There's not much freedom of speech. There's quite a bit of pressure, and if you are going to pursue change, being belligerent or overtly critical of a government will not get you anywhere. And so I think that being strategic of working alongside government is quite important in Asia as well. In this case, we found within the timber supply chain, there are gendered layers to who actually gets to work certain labor positions, who is actually impacted, women, of course, being more adversely impacted by deforestation. And we used that and brought it to policymakers, NGOs, ministry officials, and we tried to amend and create safeguards that would protect marginalized communities affected in the timber supply chain and by poor forest governance. So that's an example, I think, of perhaps not a legal mechanism. It's hard to enforce a policy at all times, especially in particular countries, but it was about collaborating and working alongside the institutions that you might not necessarily agree with, kind of implement and your own agenda as well. And this was a lot of social safeguarding, and that wasn't fairly accounted for in previous policy.
Thank you. What can you say about the young students at the World Court ruling here? I know you're collaborating a bit with this group.
Yeah, so I think them raising forth a motion in the ICJ is obviously a very critical case. I'm actually not working with them, but I mean, reading their work from afar is very important. I think the law is an important tool, but it's I think for us as young people, we can push narrative, we can try to drive a progressive agenda, but at the same time, I believe that, it also requires accountability, as we mentioned. I think as young people, we're trying to kind of move the needle forward and like inspiring court cases, but at the same time, I think we are powerful in that, but ultimately that lies in ultimate higher body, and maybe it's difficult for us to, ensure its place unless others are willing to court with us.
Well, thank you very much for your input and for your work in this field. Sandrine?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I think the importance of linking legislation and legal accountability to the climate movement is so fundamental, and also in terms of diversity loss. And I'm an ambassador for the ecocide law. I fundamentally believe that the way in which we're now really discussing ecocide within the context of human rights is fundamental. I gave a testimony at the court in The Hague on the fundamental links between human rights and ecocide. This must continue, and it's not just the youth that are pushing this forward. Here in Switzerland, we've had this incredible group
Seniorinnen.
of the elderly women, these
Fantastic.
women, the grandmothers that went forward, and also the government of not actually keeping its climate target. So I think it's incredibly important that we use this as a continuous lever. Unfortunately, we don't win all the cases, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean we should stop. It means that we're creating the noise that's necessary and the accountability mechanisms and measures that are fundamental.
Thank you very much indeed. So Andreas, turning to you, in terms of this crossing of for the 1.5 and promise of, or the possibility of invigorating business leaders, what pick up as a CEO, and what do you see? What can you say about this? Injecting some more rocket fuel into the process of business here.
Well, it's a complex situation. We are breaching the promise and the goals. On the other hand, it's not the right time to give up. Actually, we just should speed up our process. We are Hitachi developing solutions, and we have to deploy them. As much as I understand the legal cause, and it's probably necessary to raise the awareness, legal court cases are not changing our climate. It's only a solution, change of environment, of behavior, and doing the right thing. And it has to be a business at the end as well, because it could be naive to assume that just doing the right thing and burning money will solve it, because it will have a natural end to it. So I think we have to just to keep core developing new solutions, put businesses in the context of society as well. That's what we call social innovation, Hitachi, and just deliver more of that. And I think if I look at business, how much we have delivered for Indian projects to support renewables to be connected, or in the UK to connecting renewables. And also if I look at my market, there's quench for electricity, and IEA is saying that the electricity demand is tripling and quadrupling in the next years, much more than the primary energy. It shows that electrification of a lot of processes going away from molecules is working, because this is actually what drives me around, because I have a hard time to deliver the products. So with all this skepticism, with all this bad news, probably there is light on the horizon from my point of view. We just have to work together now to finding faster solutions, at least for my business, because actually I would say, if I blame myself, I'm delaying the process a little bit, because I can't raise factories as fast and deliver products as I want to, as my customer wants. So from that point of view, I think there's some optimism necessary. I think, yes, we don't have time, so we shouldn't lay back, but we just should invigorate our actions.
Thank you, Andreas. I'd like to turn to Ingmar again. The part of communicating this breaching, well, hopefully not permanent breaching of the 1.5, but how do we communicate this to the global audience to really invigorate and instead of despair?
It's a challenge, because if you communicate the bad side, people can give up. And if you communicate it that we're going to make it, even if only 2 people raise their hands, people will just continue to do not enough. But Johan Rockström actually had something he revealed yesterday that caught my attention of some how to communicate this when we are all failing some of the targets, not all targets and not full. And he made it very simple. I think most people here have seen this planetary boundaries. It's kind of complicated graph about when we are hitting boundaries in different areas like biodiversity, like ocean acidification, climate, etc. But he simplified all that knowledge into a bar where it was green, healthy.
The planet.
The planet health check, a yearly planet health check. Green means everything is fine. Red means that we're gonna die. And yellow means that we are kind of in a risk territory, but it's kind of, we must do everything we can to not move it further into the red. That's how, when you go to a doctor, if you're a chain smoker, if you, I mean, you don't know if you're going to die of lung cancer. If you stop smoking, you can die anyway. But you do know that if you continue to smoke, sooner or later you will. So now we are at yellow. We should stop smoking. It maybe will save us in the end. We must maybe going to be sick anyway because we're smoking too late. But we don't know that. But we do know that, or we continue smoking, burning fossil fuel and other destroying the planet, we will not make it. So we don't have time to make it on red. We are on yellow, and as long as it's on yellow, we can turn it back to green. And methane is something I come back to, because methane cannot only help make sure that we're not entering the red stage. It can actually make sure that we're going back to the green, because the difference between short-lived climate gases is that if you emit short-lived climate gas, it will disappear from the atmosphere, and when it's not up in the atmosphere, we will actually not. It will turn down the heat. But if we don't do this on time, the methane will be released in the thunder and everything will be very red. But we are not on red, we are on yellow, so we should keep doing everything we can and everything and more than that.
Thank you, Ingmar. That's why we have the Buy More Time campaign all the time. Gail, you need a microphone.
I do. I mean, I think this issue of how do we communicate science and risk is the critical one, because I think we're certainly losing some of the battles against extreme weather, but we're also losing the narrative. And I think that to take a look at who's the target audience. And I think we need to really very specifically tailor messaging and communication depending on who the target audience is. So there's not one size that's going to fit all. It's not going to be one thing that will tackle all of them. And if we take a look at what Arctic Basecamp has done and what our sister initiative Basecamp has done, which speaks science to culture, I think we've learned a few things that are really relevant to this space. First of all, Arctic Basecamp set up an online platform to try to speak science to the public. And one of the interesting ways of doing that was not to necessarily start with the science at all, was to start with global risks around the world, to really talk to people about what was of interest and pressing concern to them, and then explain it. So for Science Webs, in 2 years to have 4 million unique visitors to try and figure out information is a huge success. So there's a tremendous desire for information about risk facing people in 50% of that is coming from the African continent, and then another 30% is spread between Asia and Latin America, and then some of the other markets as well. So certainly in places they're actually feeling the impacts, they want to know what is going on because nobody is talking to them actually. So you have to communicate in a way about things they're interested. But if we take a look, I'm Canadian, but if we take a look at North America more broadly, talking doom and gloom is not going to work. So Sandrine, about LA, people want to see what's going on in LA, but then there's a fight about, oh, it's not climate change, it is, or it's so-and-so's fault, whatever. The point is that people are concerned about the things they love. And yet all of the things that we love are at risk because of the climate and nature emergency. So we need to start not with the planet, not with science. We need to start with what is important to you. And then messaging back.
Make it
and
more
a message
personal.
Of risk and opportunity and relevance and action. So I think we need to figure out, use the tools that business has used for a long time to sell us all the things they've been selling us and actually use it to create behavior change.
Thank you very much. There was just a report from WEF just before the week started here, saying that within the next decade, climate has to result in annual losses of 560 to 610 billion US dollars annually for companies, extreme weather related primarily. And we WEF and we address, the theme is, of course, the economy, the broader theme here. So from your perspectives here, all of you, what would you like to conclude this session here as a call to action to the leaders, bringing in that most leaders here do have the financial focus, but in general, what is your call to action that you would like to conclude this session with? And I'd like to start with you, because you're on this here, and then we go away.
I think the call to action is very simple. If we're going to deal with global risks to the economy, we have to tackle the climate and nature emergency, and we have to tackle it now, regardless of the administration that comes in wherever else in the world. So it is not the time to just focus on traditional business. It's act now.
Thank you very much. Andreas Schierenbeck.
From my view, I think it's the right time to give up. I think it's the right time to accelerate what we are doing. There's so much things we can still develop, still do, changing our behavior, to finding the right middle ground between giving up and saying there is no problem. I think that's what the responsibility to walking that small path.
Thank you very much. You're very short to the point here. It's wonderful. There is some time if you want to do a little bit lengthy.
Thank you. We
Saying
don't
that, I
have
can share the
time.
microphone back to you again. Well, I'm just looking at the clock here. Sandrine.
I think building on that, it's not only that it's not the time to give up, but we have no choice to give up. And that means, what is then the choice? How do we create those alternative futures? We need to be better at demonstrating that there are so many possible other paths. That was the work that we tried to do at Earth for All, and that we continue with Johan to talk about. The reality check is here. This year we did surpass 0.5. That doesn't mean we will again if we get our act together. We don't have another 50 years. We have very clear pathways. All the evidence is there. Science, the data points demonstrating exactly what we need to do. The call to action is, what do we as individuals and as a collective hold dear on this planet? It's being alive. Here we are in the most extraordinary scenery, talking about the fact that we could actually lose it. How do we translate that into the emotion that's necessary so that every single individual understands that they're actually a champion for change? That they're not part necessarily of the problem, even though we're all part of the problem, but they're also really a part of the solution.
Thank you, Sandrine.
So from my side, my one message would be that business is still in, right? We can't ignore the political shifts that are happening. Of course, the changes in the US will have an effect, but politics is temporary, and what we're seeing in Davos is businesses continuing to step up and see the economic case and the physical impact on their business and their supply chain. So that's a very important message. That said, of course, as we're seeing in the increasing impacts from climate change around the world, which affect people, affect communities, but also affect businesses, is helping that kind of wake-up call among businesses, even as they may see difficult politics in some countries, which is those impacts are growing, and that's now become a business risk. So we see companies now saying, looking at it from Mano's business perspective, well, climate risk is now business risk, so to take the most responsible step for my company is to act on this. And that then compounds this increasingly strong business case we were about earlier. So there is that's a positive take on the business case is here and acting. But we have to be aware of the fact that we lose this narrative if we're not careful, and that businesses have to step up and speak to the policymakers so that they want it. And with that, we can start to see these accelerating change that we all want to see, despite the seriousness that the science is showing.
Thank you very much indeed. Mayumi.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think, so this is our second day here, full day here, and this question has been asked 3 times already to myself. So, and I think that's precisely the issue, actually.
Because we need action, right? We need action.
Are you
Yes, we
answering
do.
the same,
We need
or
action.
are you coming up with different answers?
Well, I think that the point that I was trying to make is that, sometimes when you go to events, year in, year out, and you're still asking the same question, it makes us quite disenchanted sometimes as young people because we need progress. And I think that as a message to world leaders, it's not, as Gail said, you have to think about how it affects you personally. One day you get your home, you might lose family members, you might, lose a community that you hold dearly. And I think we have to make it personal and really understand what that means for us, even if it's not what it might look like in the future. And lastly, I would just say it's not just about recognizing environmental consequences of extraction. It's also the environmental consequence of apathy is massive, and we're seeing that now. And so I think we ask ourselves this question time and time again, kind of belaboring and delaying the action as we ask ourselves these things every year also has a consequence in and of itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Ingmar.
I've also got this many times. So the call to action, and I always say we don't have time to wait. But I would like to answer this time a little bit different by not re-answering the question, but stealing something yesterday on a panel. I'm stealing pride. I don't remember the name of the person saying this, but it gave me motivation. I think that's what we need. We need motivation at most, and if we get the motivation up, we will have so much that we have achieved already. But how can we get this motivation? Let's look at difficult situations that humans have been in before and how they actually survived it. And this story is from war time. You have those war camps where you have people imprisoned, very harsh condition, and only a few really survived this war camp. And the people that survived it was a few, was on a panel, kind of explaining why did they survive and not everyone else that they were in the same war camp. And the ones having answered the same, all of them. And it was all that the negative people, the people that were running around like crazy and saying like, oh shit, we're not going to make it, this is terrible, they died. Because they didn't believe they had a future and they were too negative and they died. But you also had kind of the other people on the other side. And they were like, no, it's fine. I mean, it's some bad food and we have no health here and we're probably never going to be, it's fine, it's going to be sunny tomorrow. I mean, that's something we have heard about in climate, right? You just try to deny it. They died. So who survived? The ones surviving were the ones that saw reality in the eye, but they kept hope and motivation up, and they survived. So that's what we need to get in people's mind. We can't be unrealistic, optimistic, ignoring the problems, but we can't be that pessimistic saying that we're not going to make it either. We must be very realistic and see the truth that we are in deep problem, but we will never give up, because if we give up, we will die. We need to just keep accelerating and do it.
Thank you, Ingmar. You wanted to come back, Sandrine, and I think you can have a few minutes, one or two from Andrea and Gail, if you'd like to before we conclude. So Sandrine first.
Yeah, this example really speaks to me because my whole family, one side of my family, were resistance fighters. And so linked to motivation, we need courage. And when I look at the fact that my grandfather, who was one of the ones who survived because he constantly believed in a better world and that we could survive, but also my grandmother who stayed back and with all of her cousins would ask the Nazis to help them cross the road while they had bombs underneath their prams. They took risks. And I think our call to action is also complacency is complicitness. Today, when we see the lack or the potential backlash and backtracking on action, we have to ask ourselves, who is going to stand up and fight? We have to fight, all of us, as individuals, as business leaders, as government leaders, for what we believe. There is not a plan B, and there is no planet B. So let's fight for this planet and for our own survival. And it's going to be tough, but, you know, it's fun when it gets tough. That's the whole idea of the race, right? That's the whole idea of the marathon. So let's make sure that this is actually around courage as well and looking up for what we all believe in.
Thank you, Sandrine. Andrea?
I think you were right. I didn't give up. I ran a few marathons afterwards, actually. Finally reached my goal. So from point of view, it was, you know, but my point of action was as well, we have to communicate more between these things. You know, we are too much inclined to say it's black or white. We are dying, we are surviving. This is the right opinion, this is the wrong opinion. I think we have to come back more to an open discussion to understand, to find a compromise. And I've seen too often that we're looking for technically perfect solutions, which nobody can afford. which are maybe solving it, but if they're not getting implemented, they're not solving anything. Right? Going to an 80% solution is, from an engineer's point of view, sometimes cheaper and better. Yes, it's not perfect. Yes, it's not doing all the trick, but it's better than nothing. And maybe it gains us time or to become better. But we are sometimes inclined to see it black and white. No, it's not 100%, then we don't doing it, right? And we find a good compromise, I think, will bring us well to much more people which supporting that and accepting that. Because we have to be very careful not scaring people or threatening them or impacting their life in a way that it would feel very uncomfortable. Because then you don't get support, and if you don't get support, the political will is not there to doing the right thing.
Thank you, Andreas.
I think hope only comes from action.
Aye, indeed.
And nature never gives up. Everywhere that is damaged, polluted, a disaster, nature comes back. Every single time, every single place. We're not on that planet. And hope is alive, hope is part of nature, and hope is part of us. We just have to keep going.
Thank you much indeed. And we all have a part to play in this real-life drama, right? So I'm turning now to the camera here. For all our viewers that enjoy this panel or other broadcasts, please consider what role you can play, how you can communicate based on the insights that the esteemed panelists here shared from their different perspectives, because there's always room for improvement. And many people say that we know there's going to be a radical future. How radical depends on how radical it can be now in terms of brave and going into action mode. So please consider how you can contribute, and please join us on the We Don't Have Time app. You could share stories and push for change, inspired by these wonderful panelists here. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and we'll just keep at it, won't we? Well, indeed. Thank you very much. And thank you, Hitachi, for making this panel possible. It's going to be right back after a short break. Please stay with us, and thanks again.